when you make a commitment to something, you'll be surprised to see the things that happen that you couldn't have anticipated when you made the decision and made the commitment. Anybody that's out there thinking about making a decision, if it's a full commitment, then you might be surprised to see how the things move with you.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Orengo-Bear, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. For today's episode, we sat down with Robert Johnson, an accomplished artist with a love of a plethora of subject matter. Robert shares his journey from practicing law to pursuing his passion for traditional art forms like portraits, still lifes, and landscapes. He describes the influential role his brother played in introducing him to the art world and the pivotal advice he received from his teacher named Frank Wright. Robert also discusses the unexpected opportunities that arose when he committed to becoming a full-time artist, including a residency in France. Throughout the conversation, Robert emphasizes the importance of following one's deep inner motivation and being open to the universe's surprises. He offers advice to aspiring artists about finding the right galleries and marketing their work effectively. Finally, he tells us about his upcoming open studio event, as well as upcoming shows and workshops. Welcome, Robert, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Laura. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I'm so happy to have you because your work is absolutely gorgeous. I was looking and I'm obsessed with your chicken paintings. And that sounds really funny, but I really love your chicken paintings and your flower paintings. You have such a breadth of work, and it's all absolutely sentimental and beautiful and so well painted. So I congratulate you on your work.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. And then before we dive into your beautiful work, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm an artist. I like to do what's called traditional art. I have a lot of interest in different genres of paintings, portraits, still lifes, animals, landscapes I love. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I've made a living doing it for 20 years. So I'm happy being an artist.
Yes. And it's so surprising that you've been doing it for 20 years, and it really truly looks like you've been doing it for so much longer. And your background, of course, is so fascinating because, as I know and as you know, that our guests will find out, is that you've had a couple of career shifts, which is one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you, because I feel like there are a lot of people today who might have a day job, might have a job that they're currently in, and they're actually artists at heart, and they want to make that shift. So I did want to ask you about your background and how you decided and when you decided to follow the path of the artist.
Well, I don't want to ramble on too long, but it's an early start. When I was growing up in Southern Virginia, I I used to love to draw, and as a kid, 6 years old, I recently discovered after my mother passed away that she had given me a sketchbook and written on the front Bobby's drawings at age 6. And I mainly it was cowboys and Indians and lots of violence. But I did love to draw at that age, and I'm glad that she kept that. And I also discovered after she passed away that she had kept some of my report cards from my teachers as an elementary school, and then first or second grade, I can't remember which, the teachers said he really loves to draw and he's very good. So I had it kind of planted in my system from an early age, but then I got involved in sports and football particularly, and played basketball and track and everything too. And the art was still in my life, but it wasn't getting the focus that it really needed. And that continued on through college when I was fortunate enough to get a football scholarship and was very active in that. And then after that, I went to law school, and that took a lot of time and focus. But I do remember during law school that I did some portrait work and some figure work in my room when I would finish uh, studying and learning the law. Then I started a law practice, and actually I really enjoyed the law practice. It was something social about it, getting to know your clients and your staff and the judges. It was very social, and I like that part of it, and I like the the intellectual challenge of dealing with these cases and the people involved in it. And while I was practicing law, I somehow, I think it was through my brother, I just had this instinct to pick up the art again. And I had bought a house here, old house that had a building in the back. I think it may have been used for animals or something, but it had a floor and a good structure, and I built that out to a studio. And with the help of my brother, who was in California at that time. And I remember very well, my brother came out he had worked in Washington a lot. I'll get more about him. Is very instrumental in all of my choices. But we were working on the studio one day and putting a foundation in the back of my house. And 3 or 4 of my neighbors were sitting there watching us. What are these people doing? And one of them was a good client of mine in a law practice, and couldn't figure out what these people were doing. So art is, it's not there in everybody's life. But while I was practicing law, I started to get more and more interested in the art world. And I would get up in the morning and work in that studio before I went to work. And I'd have to be at work about 9 o'clock. So I'd get up around 6:30 and do that. And then in the evenings, in this area, which is right near Washington, D.C., and the universities there, Georgetown, George Washington, I would start going to art classes and drawing sessions that were sponsored by these schools. And I would be in touch with my brother. The more I got into it, the more I felt that it was what I was here to do on earth. And it was very, very attractive. My brother, I would like to tell the people viewing this podcast about him. He was 4 years older than I was, and a very good athlete, also a scholarship athlete, a wide receiver and punter, William and Mary, and I really looked up to him. Can't remember him doing too much drawing. He did a couple, I think, but our mother liked to paint. She set aside a room in the back of our house, and I think it may have had an impact on both of us, my brother and me. But anyway, when he was, say, a sophomore, I think, at William and Mary, somehow he took an art course and really got hooked on it. And William and Mary is in Williamsburg, Virginia, which has been restored to its beauty and original state by the Rockefeller Foundation. He got more and more into art, and when he graduated, he had a degree in math and an offer uh, to work at NASA in Florida. But he chose instead to get a master's in art conservation with a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, which saw his possibilities. And he went to New York and 2 years there, and he's got his degree in art conservation. And then what showed up on the plans was a Fulbright fellowship to go to Italy to study art conservation with some really fine conservators over there, including the person who restored the chapel, Sistine Chapel ceiling. And one person I know he worked with over there restored a lot of Rembrandts in the Rijksmuseum. And when he came back, he was living in Virginia and then got a house in Northern Virginia. And then he worked in the art world in Washington as a conservator. He worked on paintings from the Smithsonian. I remember the Freer Gallery. He restored 26 Whistler paintings there. And I remember just a very awakening when I came up from law school to visit him when he was in Northern Virginia. I went down in his basement and he had a portrait of Pocahontas, the only one that exists, that he was restoring for the Smithsonian. But that was the world he was in. And then the Los Angeles County Museum was just being started. And they had received a lot of funds from wealthy people to help get the museum started. And they asked him to start the conservation lab there, which he did. And in the course of starting that conservation lab, he had a kind of implied relationship with all the people who had contributed the money. And many of them were big time art collectors. The names you'd probably mention, but I'm not going to mention them now. But anyway, they were big time collectors that he would help on their collections. Spent 6 months in Europe with one of them looking for great art to collect. Well, what he did for me, though, was kind of involve me in that world. And I got a glimpse of the art world before I made this decision to become an artist that held art in a very high standard of admiration and importance. He took me to, he was really very considerate and inviting me to go to New York City with him. I was still practicing law. I took a day off and went up there with him and to view a Rubens painting that the gallery was interested in. So he took me to the gallery, met with the gallery director and viewed the Rubens painting, and then talked to me about it on the way back in the cab. And what's good about it? Is the price good? Or, what's, repetitive about other Rubens work or so forth. And one time there were 4 paintings that were coming in to the National Gallery from California, from the museums that he worked with there. And he invited me to come from my house is in Northern Virginia, near the Dulles Airport, to come out and ride with the paintings into the National Gallery. There were 4 of them. I remember one was a Gauguin, one was a Rembrandt. And on the way from Dulles Airport to the National Gallery, the van had to stop for some reason, and the guards got out with their guns. And then we took the paintings on out to the National Gallery, and he helped I watched him unload them and so forth. But just being in that world with him, it kind of, when people would get out of a cab to protect artwork, it put art on a very serious and high level for me that was the art world that I got to know. And I thought that's what the art world is. It wasn't just a hobby. It was something that people would sacrifice for, would pay for, would admire, etc. Uh, so he was a wonderful influence. And the other thing that really helped me along, I would go to these classes in the evening. Some of them were instructional classes, and some of them were just open drawing sessions sponsored by the universities here. One of the classes I went to was a drawing class at George Washington taught by a person named Frank Wright, who was an excellent local artist, a Harvard graduate in art, and really a good teacher, very involved in the art world here in Washington. And he had a studio that he painted in when he wasn't teaching at George Washington. And on Saturdays, he would sometimes invite people to come by in the studio and visit with him and his work. And when I was in his class, I asked him if I could come by on a Saturday and bring some of my drawings in for him to look at. And I did so and brought them in. We sat down together and he looked at them and shook his head and seemed to like them. Didn't say too much about them. And maybe, this head should be a little bigger or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I could tell he kind of liked them. Mm-hmm. Then, as I was leaving, I was right at the door. I turned around and looked. I said, "Frank, can I be a real artist? A real artist that gets in galleries and museums and work is, admired." He said, "You'll never know until art gets your very best focus, your energy, your attention. And then you'll find out." And I thought that was wonderful advice. And that's exactly at the time that I decided I would turn over my practice to my wonderful partner, who was an excellent attorney. And I felt the clients would be well served. And so I didn't feel bad about that. Then the next thing I did was call my brother and tell him I had made this decision. Did he have any advice? He was very short on it. He said, "Compare yourself only to the masters and learn how to draw." It was very short advice. But I remember both of those people and the input they had, and I think it was very good advice. From then on, I did another thing. Forgive me if I'm rambling on too much.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, I found out that about David LaFell and the Art Students League in New York, and I wanted to go there. And I knew someone who had studied with him and highly recommended him. And I wanted to go there and study at the Art Students League with him for some time. And the Art Students League is not difficult to enroll in. Sometimes it's hard to find an open class, but generally you can get in there. And the tuition was very reasonable, but you couldn't find a place to stay. You had to have a place in New York, which was very hard to find. I was at a drawing session in Washington, D.C. It was owned by an art club in Washington. James Madison's old house, and they would have drawing sessions in the evening there, and I would go to those occasionally. And I was in it one time uh, drawing, and the fellow next to me I could see he looked over my drawings, and we got to talking about art and so forth, and I found out that he was down in Washington from Monday to Friday working on a mural in the Capitol, the United States Capitol. And he, on the weekends, he'd go back to New York, and he taught or monitored a class at a place in an art club in New York called the Salmagundi Club, which is a wonderful place. And I encourage the people that are listening, if they get to New York, to stop by it. They've got a great collection of art and a lot of good things going on there. Started by the American artist who went to France to study and came back to the United States, and they started that. And they also started the Art Students League. So, well, anyway, what came out of that conversation with this gentleman, he, on his own, set up arrangements for me to stay for a month at the Salmagundi Club in a little third floor room. And during that time, I was able to find a rental space so that I could rent while I continued the studies with David Leffel. And I never anticipated something like that would happen. I have a little quote from a German philosopher called Goethe that I hand out a printed version to a lot of the classes that I teach when I teach workshops. And it basically says that when you make a commitment to something, you'll be surprised to see the things that happen that you couldn't have anticipated when you made the decision and made the commitment. And that was one of them. I never would have thought I could have a room on the third floor of the Salmagundi Club, rent-free, and get started at the Art Students League, which is a great place to study. But I think that Goethe quote is true. So anybody that's out there thinking about making a decision, if it's a full commitment, then you might be surprised to see how the things move with you.
Yes, and you're one of the many artists who have mentioned that, how it feels like once you really make a decision about something, it's almost like the universe conspires to help you make it happen. Like everything just falls into place in a certain way, which is really magical.
It's surprising and unanticipated.
Yes.
I could mention another little thing that hopped into my life. A couple years after I had made that commitment, I got an invitation from the French embassy here in Washington to spend a month in France, in Brittany, at a studio of a former artist there. And I took my wife and little daughter there, and we stayed a month, and I could paint two paintings a day, and still have a lot of French food and a good place to stay right in the heart of the place was called Dinan. Who would have ever anticipated that? It's that Goethe quote. It's just things happen like that that you don't anticipate. But it was a very enjoyable time. And all they wanted from me at the end of the month, and they were very nice to me and my family. They came by with a group of the people that organized this and chose one of the paintings for their museum there. So I thought I had all the stuff out that I had done during the time, and they chose just one. So it was a very kind thing they did. I enjoyed it. My family enjoyed it, and very memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an experience of a lifetime. And I love how you mentioned that they kept one of your paintings for a museum there because you had, it reminds me of when you asked Frank Wright about could I, have my work in museums and be represented by galleries, and there you go, you're in a museum. So it's pretty crazy in a good way. It's amazing how, again, how everything just falls into place once you start saying yes to the things that you love and the thing that you really want to do. Everything just lines up, and it's a matter of saying yes to that opportunity to live your life in a way that is more aligned with your joy and the things that you love, which is really amazing. And I think you're an excellent example of that. And I did want to ask you as well, if there's someone listening to the podcast who is thinking of making that switch, maybe they're an attorney, or maybe they're working in an office, or they're doing something else and they really want to dive into becoming an artist, what advice would you recommend to them?
Uh, I would say that it has to be a very strong and deep motivation to do this. That someone who's contemplating a switch like that shouldn't be doing it just because they don't have a job that they like going into every day, getting away from something. Maybe it'd be better to switch to another job. But if you do have something that really feels deep inside of you, that that's what you're here on earth to do, then by all means make the choice, but be prepared for the uh, negative aspects of that, namely the income. Uh, but you might be surprised on that too. That's another one of these Goethe unanticipated things. Uh, you don't do it for the money in the art world, but sometimes it happens. And if you pursue the high level of art, then you might be surprised what happens. Uh, to me, it was a surprise because I was I was fair, and I had a wonderful wife who is also an artist, and I told her we were going to have to probably endure a lot, and I may have to raise a garden, but she was really willing to do that. She knew what I was up to, and I appreciate that. But uh, it didn't work out that way. Again, it was one of these Goethe things that some galleries got my things, and I was able to send my daughter and stepson through college and have a decent life and not sacrifice so much
Yeah.
uh, from the economic side. And you might be surprised.
Well,
If
it's a
you
happy
do
surprise.
what you really want, and even if the economics doesn't work out, and I have friends that uh, and the times have changed in the art world too, but if you're doing what you really feel like you're here to do and you love doing it, you won't have any regrets. You'll figure out a way to get through it.
Yes, very, very well said. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast. And another thing that I want to ask you, because I find it interesting that you went into law and then switched over to painting. Do you find that there are similarities in the two careers in how maybe in how they're done or how your brain processes things?
There's not a whole lot of carryover, um, but there's the work ethic that
Mhm.
you get into. You get used to working instead of just hanging out, and I think that's a carryover from the law. Uh, the only other thing that, and I enjoyed law practice. I like the people. I like the intellectual side of it, but uh, I couldn't do art. I couldn't do both and do what I'm doing today if I had kept on law. One little thing that is probably worth mentioning, uh, the to those out there who love to paint or trying to learn how to paint or get better at painting. One little thing that I remember from the law world is when I was in law school, when the teachers was discussing a case that had been appealed to a higher court where the lawyer was standing up before the justices and making his argument, and he went on and on, and the judge asked him, I understand what you're saying, let's say, Mr. Jones, but what about the case of Wilson versus Harnett? And he said, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. And he went a little further. And uh, and the judge interrupted again. So what about Wilson versus Harnett? I'd like to hear that. And he said, I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get there on that case. And the judge said, you're there now.
Mhm.
And when I'm teaching workshops, other artists, I like to keep that in mind, that when you see something that's wrong on your canvas, you're there. You don't put it off and I'll get to it later or before I leave, but right now I've got to do this leaf, you know. If you see something wrong, I think you have to correct it.
Yeah.
But that's the only carryovers that I can bring from the law world, really. It's a different world, very different.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah. I guess also the reason I thought maybe there might be a bit more is because I find that there is quite a bit of an intellectual side to painting as well, where you are working through a lot of problem solving. And of course, I'm not familiar with law, so I can't really compare. But from my outsider perspective, it does seem that there is quite a bit of research in both, where you have to research cases in law, and for painting, you research other artists and you research masterworks for problem solving purposes to imitate or to see how they solve that problem so that you can add it or use that in your own paintings. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think you're right. Uh, I think that relates to the work ethic.
Mhm.
If you have that work ethic and that desire to figure out problems, then you're confronted with it in the art world or the law world as well as the art world. I think that's a carryover. And I think you put it very well.
Thank you. And then funny enough, it's so cool that you studied with LaFell because he is one of my absolute favorites. One of the very first books that I bought was actually by one of his students, and she had taken notes from all his classes. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Painting Secrets from the Masters. And that was the very first oil painting book that I ever got myself. And it is so cool. When I meet someone who's studied with David LaFell, I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Because he just from the notes of that book, it must have been amazing to study directly with him and to see how he sees everything.
Uh, I not only studied with him, I kept in touch with him, and I spent a half a year out in Taos, New Mexico, where we were able to get together and keep up to date on stuff. Uh, but he was, I guess, what he also kept a very high level on what he was after. His whole life, he didn't put out any bad work. You know, that only he told me once that he only painted 12 a year, and they went out and they've done very, very well.
Yes.
He's a great,
Yes.
wonderful person and a wonderful teacher.
Amazing. Yes. And also, I did want to ask too about your brother. If he, because you have you had such a wonderful experience with your brother of seeing the side of the art world that is about protection and about the conservation of history, conservation of all of these beautiful things. How did he feel about you becoming an artist? How did he also see your career develop?
Uh, I think he was happy on it. He gave me some advice along the way, and uh, we painted together down in Southern Virginia. I remember and he was very, very good at his advice to me. One event that remember very well, we were out painting in the country in Southern Virginia, painting lots of old houses down there of the 18th century, I don't know. But it was out in a field, vacant, and we painted it and went back to my family had a farm down there. And when we got out of the car, he looked at my painting. He said, "Wow," he said, "it looks like an early Pizarro." And I started puffing up and saying, "Well, maybe I'm really good and everything." And as we walked away, he said, "Remember, I said an early Pizarro."
Mm.
He could see I was getting overconfident, about where I was in the art world, and
Mhm.
still have a ways to go. It was wonderful influence on me.
Yes, yes. And the fact that he's also he was very well read and very, aware of all the different artists and their stages. He, I guess, could have also had a very intimate idea of how the artwork develops over time by an artist, right? Where you start at a certain place and then the continual improvement, it just grows and grows and grows. So it's very great to have had that.
That's a good observation. If you take a look at your past artwork through the last several years, you might see a big difference, and hopefully better.
Yes.
But depending on the time and the focus that you have on it. But he was aware of that. He was aware.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, now I wish my sister became a conservator so I could have her as a little helper. Like, hey, can you critique my work and see what's going on? And then also in terms of materials, because there are so many materials today that I feel like we are discovering maybe aren't as good for the conservatorship of paintings and don't last as long. So I think that must have been a beautiful, amazing relationship to have. Um, and then
I,
also, oh, yes.
one other thing that we did that I'd like to share with the viewers here. Uh, he unfortunately had juvenile diabetes,
Mm.
and it affected his job, and uh, he had to leave it, and because of his health. And uh, but he after he left, he still kept his connections with the art world, and he was invited by the Metropolitan Museum of Art to accompany a film crew to make a film on Leonardo da Vinci and his drawings. Uh, they had about 12 or 13 drawings of things falling out of the sky and through the clouds, and animals and buckets and stuff. And people have always tried to figure out what in the world he was thinking about. And my brother invited me to go with him, and we went over there and accompanied the producers, and he had his input on it. And we went to uh, the village of Vinci, which is Leonardo's village, uh, and we were filming out near a stream near the village, and the village is up on a mountain, or not a mountain, but a hill. It's a couple 100 feet higher than the surrounding areas. Still a small village. And while we were there, a storm came in, and it only came in through the upper levels. And Leonardo grew up there with his mother, took care of him. His father was away, uh, didn't really help him that much, but uh, I thought of little Leonardo in a room there growing up with storms and lightning and, and things falling through the sky, and I think that's maybe where it came from. But I didn't have any input on what the director said or anything, but it was one of these things, though, that I must say it sticks in my memory of what my brother did for me,
Yeah.
keeping it on a high level. And after we left Italy, we went up to Amsterdam to meet with one of his friends that I think he had studied with, who was working on the Night Watch by Rembrandt. And he took us into the room where the Night Watch was and what he was doing with it and everything. So it was really a great experience that I'm really appreciative of what my brother Ben did for me.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And do you find also that he maybe helped you on the side of, maybe the business side of art, or maybe the marketing side? Was there anything that he was able to help you with in that end? Or did you, because of your experience also running your own business as a lawyer, did you find that the business practices there carried over as well into the business and marketing side of your paintings?
The I guess I had some fortunate events. Um, I think, yes, I think if you run your own business like a law practice, you do get into the practical side of the economics and so forth of it. Uh, but it's not the same. Uh,
Mhm.
I was very fortunate because I never anticipated this. I anticipated a great sacrifice, and what came down was a very, it was almost like a gift that the work became popular, uh, and there wasn't an economic sacrifice on it. Um, so I guess I've just been fortunate. that, but I guess there is something in the back of all of our minds about the economy and whether you can survive on this. But I was fortunate to dodge that bullet.
Yeah. Um, Although obviously you still have experience anyway, do you find that there is some maybe some advice that you would give to someone in terms, in the business side of painting that you find has helped you with managing your work, selling your work, or maybe even working with galleries or collectors?
Galleries are very important. Uh, Good ones that promote your work is what you should look for. Uh, that deal with you on an honest basis and straightforward and outgoing with all they're doing. That's an important part of the art world. It's become a little less important through the years as the digital world keeps growing larger. But it's still there. It's still there. A good gallery can help you a lot. Promote your work, sell your work, pay you for the work. That's something good to try to seek out. They're still out there. They're fewer than there used to be. Uh, on my side, uh, I like I'm exploring both worlds. You know, I do a newsletter, which has been some successful in business. The website, very successful. I've uh, kind of tiptoed into Instagram. I've never posted anything on Facebook, but I am starting an Instagram site, which is today's world, I guess, that you have to live in. Uh, and I might mention uh, that the place that I have a studio here in Washington has open studios a couple times a year. It's closed to the public, but there are about 40 artists there that a beautiful studio, I must say. I'm very blessed to have it with north light, something that all artists love, and 12-foot windows. It's an old school, wonderful place. But they have this open studio, and that's been a good source of, yeah, well, not just meeting people, but the economic success too.
And then,
One coming up on December 8th in Washington.
oh, that's amazing. That must be so fun to go see your work in person. And actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your work and because you paint such a breadth of different things. Is there a specific subject that you absolutely love to paint, or do you just find beauty in everything?
Oh, I love to paint a lot of different subjects.
Mhm.
Uh, I think the thing that people that are listening and watching should know, just paint what you really love to do. You know, don't feel compelled to pursue things that are not inspiring to you. And I'll just mention one little episode in my art experience. I was in a gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I had had a wonderful, successful show. I'm happy to say, and not being boastful, just it was they did a good job in marketing the art, and I had like 23 still lifes in it, what they wanted, and I had they were all recent work that I had just created, and it worked. It was good for the gallery, good for me. And but I was kind of worn out with still lifes. And when I was a little boy, everybody in our family had a job, and my job was taking care of chickens. And so I grew up with them, and I know what they look like, and I can draw them from memory. And I called the gallery uh, director there, and I said, "Would you like a chicken painting?" And I remember this just like it was yesterday, Laura. He said, "Send it if you must."
Oh no.
So I sent it to him, and it sold very quickly. I don't think they realize that people do like things like that.
Yes.
And in about 10 days, I got another call. Do you have any more chicken paintings?
Oh my gosh.
And I enjoy doing them because they come pretty easily to me. Just I don't get any credit for it because I just grew up with them.
Mhm.
I'm a little off target here, but I had a wonderful experience with a painter named Leos Marcos, who's now passed, Hungarian American. And he grew up in Hungary on a place that had a farm with horses. And he came to this country and he could do horses from memory that were incredible. I spent a month, he was so kind to offer me a time with him down there. My wife's mother was a good painter that had studied with him, and she set it up. But he could do these stagecoaches with Indians chasing them, and the horses falling over, and some getting up, and some getting shot. They do it all from memory.
Wow.
So I mentioned that only, but one, to give Mr. Marcos some credit because he was very kind to me and a heck of a good painter. Uh, but also, the chickens come pretty naturally still at this stage of life.
Yes. Your chickens are gorgeous. I
I
couldn't
enjoy
stop
doing
looking
them
at
too.
them.
I don't know if I'd like to do 23 chicken paintings in a row like the still lifes, but I enjoy every now and then doing some chickens.
Yes.
And
And you can tell.
the landscapes, the, I like to paint trees, uh, still life, and portraits. There's something
Yeah.
about a life. I do them from life. I don't do them from photographs. And
Mhm.
there's something good about that, you know.
Yeah. Amazing. Yes. I think the beautiful thing about hearing the way you talk about the things you love to paint is that it almost makes it sound like you're in love with life, which is such a beautiful thing as well. To be so in love with the world around you that it's hard for you to not want to paint everything.
That is true. That
Yes.
is true.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if someone wants to learn from you, do you have any upcoming workshops or any events that you'd like to promote?
Well, I do have the open studio in Washington on December 8th. It starts at 12 noon. Uh, and I have a lot of work up there because one thing I'm doing, I have a one-person show that I've been thankfully invited to have in Scottsdale, Arizona, at a gallery called Bonner David Gallery in Scottsdale. And the show will be in mid-March, and they scheduled it at the same time I'm doing a 5-day workshop at the Scottsdale Artist School, which is good timing for everyone. Uh, Bonner David Gallery is a very good gallery that I've just started a relationship with, but they have a gallery there in Scottsdale and one in New York. And those are the only events I have on the calendar right now. But I'll teach one or two workshops. Um, just taught a wonderful workshop out in Seattle at a school there, Picket Fence Art Studio, uh, and last weekend I taught one here in Virginia. So I put all of those up on my website. So anybody that's interested in learning, I'll keep them up there.
Perfect. And then I'll also include the link to your website, which, by the way, what is your website?
It's robertjohnsonart.com. It's a FASO website.
Perfect. Yes. And then I'll include any other links as well that you might want me to share with our listeners and our viewers. But yeah, thank you so much, Robert, for being such an inspiration and for being so full of love for your art and for the world and for everything. So thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate the invitation and all the kind things you've said about me and my art.
Of course. And I strongly encourage our listeners and our viewers to go look at your work, because seriously, the chickens, the trees, the people, everything on your website, it's just eye candy.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Of course.